So just give me 1 second here. Wait for the stream to happen. Great. Okay. Hi, Jeannie.
Bye, Jen.
So great. All right. So we can get started now. So I just.
Good in the world. They're still good in people. They're so good.
Is that you? No. My son is watching a video and he's right next to me and he is somehow the Bluetooth went and so all of a sudden I was being serenaded. All right. So I said we would look at chapter 20. The reason and so I wanted to sort of ask your indulgence. This means that we would be skipping chapter 19 at least, because chapter 19 is primarily basically a list of place names, going through and saying, this tribe ended up with this portion, and that tribe ended up with that portion, so on and so forth. So we end up with this map, basically, which looks like it's going to be difficult for. But I can try to find a map online that sort of shows the general areas based on the description in prophets of where the various tribes were located. So it's but it seems to me that it's a little bit dry in terms of reading. So I thought
I scanned it, it's dry.
yeah.
I'm glad that's been confirmed.
Yeah, okay, good. So if Ann has no objections, I'll assume that no one else has objections, and we can just move on to chapter 20, which is slightly less dry. All right. So when they had finally, actually, I added the finally part. Actually, let me I'll put up a share. Hold on one moment. There we go. And I've been told by IT, by the way, that I should have a new terminal in my office by next Wednesday. So hopefully by next Wednesday I can actually teach not in a remote location, but actually in my office where I'm supposed to do my job. So that's very, very exciting news. All right. So it starts, and the Lord spoke unto Joshua, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel." Now, this is really interesting. I was just looking at a little commentary, and it points out that this is the only place outside the 5 books of Moses, meaning outside of the Torah, that God says to somebody, "Daber el bnei Israel lemor," right? So this happens fairly often in the context of the Torah, where God is speaking to Moses all the time and says, "And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Israel and tell them thus and such," right? So it's interesting that this verbal formula occurs only here, which suggests that there's something somehow very important about this series of verses that follows. Whether we agree with that assessment or not, of course, is another question. So we can discuss. Okay, so speak to the children of Israel. And actually, I realized that where I had been reading before, the way they do the breakdown of the verses is slightly different, right? So they made an end of dividing the land. The newer translation puts that as the beginning of the next sentence rather than as the end, and that probably Uh, yeah, it probably is based on on the syntax here. Okay. All right, speak to the children of Israel, saying, assign you cities of refuge, whereof I spoke unto you by the hand of Moses, that the manslayer that killeth any person through error and unawares may flee thither, and they shall be unto you for a refuge from the avenger of blood. And he shall flee unto one of those cities, and shall stand at the entrance of the gate of the city, and declare his cause in the ears of the elders of that city. And they shall take him into the city unto them, and give him a place that he may dwell among them. And if the avenger of blood pursue after him, then they shall not deliver up the manslayer into his hand, because he smote his neighbor unawares, and hated him not beforetime. And he shall dwell in that city until he stand before the congregation for judgment, until the death of the high priest that shall be in those days. Then may the manslayer return and come into his own city, and unto his own house, unto the city from whence he fled. All right, so let's talk about this a little bit, and we can go back. We can go back to the Torah to check out, well, what was said then, and is there any differences here or there? All right, so what is your? I guess I would just say, what's your reaction to these rules?
Question.
Yeah.
Are these cities of refuge only for someone who has killed someone?
Yes, I think that's right. I think it's only in the case of manslaughter, right? Not in the case of murder, right? But in the case of manslaughter. But also not for other crimes.
Okay, nothing premeditated.
Right, nothing premeditated, exactly.
We have
So
a lot of, go ahead.
I learned this from the Torah, so I'm surprised to see it here because I thought the people would know this, but
Yeah.
why is it all laid out again here?
That's a great question. And I don't have an immediate answer to that question, but I think it's a very good question, right? We see, right, in Deuteronomy, a fair number of times we see the restatement of stories or of laws from other parts of the Torah, right? But it's interesting that we have a repetition, not just the say, now that you've gotten to the land, right, assign the other three cities of refuge, because they've already done three in the Transjordan area. But that there's this full restatement of the
Right. Unless these people weren't alive the other time.
right.
So they need the whole thing.
But presumably, right, this group was the group that was had been part of Moses's review of the Ten Commandments, right? Presumably they had heard Joshua read from these sort of things, so presumably they were aware of it. But it's still very interesting, right? That God feels the need, right, to make sure that everybody knows this, right? That the entire community needs to be told. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Well, it's sort of advanced to have the idea of a refuge or asylum for people who are innocent, but maybe in danger on the
Right.
one hand, but on the other hand, it's sort of primitive and the same old violence where you can expect that there will be an avenger of blood.
Right. And I think you're pointing to something very important, right? Which is that the Torah, at all times, in the Bible, right, we have to be aware of the Bible as descriptive versus the Bible as prescriptive, right? And where, in, you know, which is prescriptive, which is descriptive, and are there places that are both? So in terms of, this is a place that's, I would argue, is both, right? That it is grappling with the reality that the writers see, right? That when someone is killed accidentally by another person, right? There is a custom of blood vengeance, right? So if someone kills my kinsman, it is on me, right? It's not just anger, right? There's almost like an obligation that I go and kill that person.
And where does that come from?
I mean, I think I mean, I don't know where it comes from.
Oh, it's just a custom.
This is just this, and we see it, we see this in what is, sort of euphemistically called the cycle of violence, right? Where, this side kills somebody, so the other side needs to kill somebody, and then it goes back and forth until, finally, maybe at some point it stops, right? But I see Ann's hand and then Joel.
Okay, well, it says, he shall dwell there until the death of the high priest.
Yes.
Why does that get him off the hook?
Yeah, very interesting. That's another great question.
And what if the high priest lives to be 120 years old, like everyone else in the Old Testament?
Then that guy's in trouble.
He can't go home.
Right. Right. It's really interesting.
He's going to want to poison the priest, and then he'll be guilty of intentional murder.
And that'll be that. Now, again, we have to always remember also, right, that let's before I speak, let me get what Joel wants to say.
Just a quick question. Has anybody ever explained under what circumstances such a killing might take place? Like mistaken identity or just negligence, or how would this have happened?
Exactly. So there's a case, the case that's mentioned in the Torah, I think it's in Deuteronomy, is the case when someone is hewing wood and the head of the axe flies off of the handle and smacks someone in the noggin, and that's the end of them. And so the guy clearly had violence, right? But it was also clearly not any kind of a premeditated thing. So it's an accidental death, basically.
Okay.
And then there's another example I've been told, although I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, and it does, but or like if people get in I don't, I won't go any further than that. But yes, they do give concrete examples of how this can happen.
Also, if one is hunting, one could accidentally kill somebody.
What is what?
If somebody is hunting,
Yes.
you don't see someone. There's an unintended someone, whatever.
Exactly. Right, or the example that comes to mind, which I think is a very interesting one and raises questions, right, is the question of war. Right, so in battle, right, we have the case in the book of Samuel that we've been reading, right, where Avner is being pursued by a guy whose name escapes me at the moment, but he ends up sort of stopping short and killing him, right? And then that man's brother of Joab, right, who becomes an important advisor to King David, right, gets his blood revenge, right? Even though that was obviously not an accidental death, but it certainly was not murder, right? Because it happened in the context of war.
And also, he was reluctant to pursue any fighting with that brother, right?
Right.
He told him to stop.
Right, Avner knew that if he killed the kid, right, that he would be in danger. And indeed, he was right, yeah. And so, so this custom, right, which I think today, right, we would find this custom to be, looking for blood vengeance, right, we consider this sort of, not an appropriate, shall we say, response to things. And I think the Torah also doesn't find it to be responsible, right? Go ahead, Jenny.
I'm sort of surprised to hear you say that, or I don't understand what you mean, because doesn't that happen all the time between Israelis and Palestinians? And I'm thinking of the Lebanese civil war, which lasted 15 years, which was a great example of an
It-
eye for an eye. But I mean, don't Israelis and Israelis always have to take revenge for any killing?
That's the thing, right? Is, well, I mean, again, that's different, right? In the sense that these are not, the violence there is not accidental, right? I think an Israeli would say, this is terrorism, right? And, or it's military. And so this is not an analogous situation. It's not revenge for an accidental killing.
No,
Right.
I thought you meant that when you said what were you saying then would be inappropriate, we would consider to be inappropriate. You mean in response to an accidental killing? Oh,
Right.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
Response to an accidental killing, or, I mean, and actually, it's really interesting. I mean, I would actually say that in the same way, right? I don't think we would be comfortable, right, with the notion that in an act of war, not in an act of terrorism, but in an act of war, right? Somebody kills our brother. I don't know that we would then years later go back and find that person who pulled the trigger and shoot him, right? I don't know that we would find that to be an appropriate response. But in any case, the point is here that we're talking about accidental deaths. We're not talking about deaths from terrorism or crime. In those cases, right, the Torah is very clear, right, that those are punishable by death. Right? And of course, the rabbis will later come along and make it impossible to impose the death penalty, right? Which raises all kinds of other questions, right? About, well, what do you do with someone who actually has murdered somebody, right? Because there was no real penal system in ancient Israel, right? There was no. This is one of the reasons we have these cities of refuge, right? Because it sort of also functions as a kind of a prison, right? I mean, they're not in prison, but they have to stay in this city. Go ahead, Anna.
Is this the foundation, the origin of the modern day sanctuary cities? Which
Yeah.
don't have to do with death or killing somebody.
I think it is. That if you're, this is a, place you can go, right? Or if it's called cities of refuge, but I do think likely it is the same.
Yes.
I'll just mute Joel here. There. As he's on the phone. Okay, great. All right, so let's look now briefly at the, we can start with the book of Numbers. All right. So here we see, right, and maybe this is why they repeat it, because we see, and the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel. I didn't say unto them, Daber el bnei Israel. All right. When ye pass over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then ye shall appoint you cities to be cities of refuge, arei miklat, right, for you, that the manslayer that killeth any person through error may flee thither, and the cities shall be unto you for refuge from the avenger, the manslayer die not, right? And I do think that here, right, this is that sort of prescriptive thing, right? That the world is a certain way, right? That when someone dies accidentally, there's an urge to kill that person, kill that person's killer, right? And the Torah is suggesting that that's not okay, right? And that we need to find a better way of dealing with it, right? And so that better way will be essentially exile, right? That this person will have to go to one of these 6 places and make his case there, and then he has to stay there until, as we've already discussed, right, that weird thing, like if they can stay only until they have to stay there until the current high priest dies, right? And then there's somehow that triggers a kind of forfeiture of all revenge. Okay, until he stand before the congregation for judgment, and as to the cities which he shall give. Excuse me, this is Judy Jacobs. I wonder, he's trying to get on. Hello, Judy. Really, I'm in the class. Where? Are you on Zoom?
There was a different link
Yeah.
in Laura's.
Oh, there was a bad link in Laura's. Oh, that's right. Okay. Call my normal number. Who else is on the phone? All right. All right. So I'll call Sandy and let her know that we're here in mine. Suzanne alerted me to this, but I misunderstood Suzanne's email. So I didn't. Yeah, I mean, Judy, don't worry about it. I'll call you, okay? All right. See you in a second. Yes, do that. Okay, so excuse me, everybody, for a minute. I'm going to invite. Figure out how to do this. Well, that is really too bad. I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you had said, Suzanne.
I believe Laura's out of the office, so she wouldn't
Right.
have been able to fix it. If people have a Zoom app on their device, they never need to look at
Right.
anything because your Zoom room is always the same ID. And
Hello,
you can type it in there.
The problem is that, if you are calling in, and she actually just got a new iPad, so she probably is not, who knows? Not,
But maybe you could add that in your part of the program. Just open Zoom and click on join and find Jim Morgan. You don't have to depend on Laura.
exactly.
Right, or I have a whole wall full of everybody's consistent Zoom rooms and you just, right, if you have the Zoom app, you just put in the numbers.
Yeah, I always use the same one.
I know that. You and Becca and Raquel and
Exactly.
other people who are not in CCV. Yep.
Sometimes in the announcement, they don't repeat the Zoom thing right by the event.
Hi, Sandy. It's Rabbi Jim. I'm in my normal Zoom room. I guess Laura had the wrong Zoom room on her list this week, which Suzanne alerted me to, but I misunderstood what she said. So I apologize. And you can continue to join us by phone if you'd like, or or tune in to, just go to the same one you came to on Monday. If you look for Rabbi Jim in your list of ones where you've been before, it'll be there. So feel free to join by your iPad. And I'm sorry, and Sandy, if you can let us, if you are able to let us know who else was there, I'm also happy to call them as well to include them. All right, so let's go back to the book of Numbers. Okay, all right. So there'll be 6 cities of refuge, and ye shall give in the land of 3 cities beyond the Jordan, and 3 cities shall ye give in the land of Canaan. They shall be cities of refuge. So that might be one of the reasons why it gets repeated, right? Is because it's a reminder that, oh, you actually do have to assign these places. Okay. For the children of Israel, and for the stranger, and for the settler among them, shall these six cities be for refuge, right? This is for everybody. For everyone that killeth any person through error may flee thither. But if he smote him with an instrument of iron so that he died, he is a murderer. Which is very interesting, given what I just said, right? That in Deuteronomy, it says that if you hit somebody with an axe, an axe head that flies off, right? That's presumably iron. But I'm assuming that the iron thing must be in your hand, right? When it can't just be something that gets thrown accidentally. It has to be something that's in your hand or that you threw intentionally. And if he smote him with a stone in the hand whereby a man may die, and he died, he is a murderer, and the murderer shall surely be put to death. So on and so forth. The avenger of blood shall himself put the murderer to death. When he meeteth him, he shall put him to death. Right? So it says here, right, in the Torah, right, it says that, this is definitely eye for an eye kind of thing, right? If you kill somebody, and this goes back to the very beginning of the Torah, right? If you kill someone, then, if you shed blood, then your blood shall be shed. Right, which is always very interesting to me, right? Because what happens to the first murderer? And who's the first murderer in the Bible?
Oh, Cain.
Cain, right?
Cain.
Yeah, and God does not smite Cain, right? He sends him off. He basically gets to go to the Ir Miklat, right? Even though it's pretty clear that Cain was actually a murderer and not a manslayer. Okay, so if he thrust him of hatred, or hurled at him anything, lying in wait so that he died, or in enmity, right? So this emphasis, there has to be enmity, hate, right? There has to be some motivation for killing him. But if he thrust him suddenly without enmity, or hurled upon him anything without lying in wait, or with any stone whereby a man may die, seeing him not, and cast it upon him so that he died, and he was not his enemy, neither sought his harm, then the congregation shall judge between the smiter and the avenger. Right? So this makes it a little bit more complicated. Right? The question here, right, is does this killing amount to a capital crime? Right? And the congregation has to decide. Yeah, go ahead, Jeannie.
Well, here it departs from our laws.
Yes.
Originally, if you didn't have intent, if it was an accident, you're off the hook. But in our system, if you get in a fight, if you hit someone with intent, but your intent is just to inflict a little bit of harm because you're in a barroom brawl,
Right.
that could be manslaughter and not murder.
Right.
And the punishment is lesser.
Right.
Also, if a person is under extreme emotional distress,
Right.
that murder could come down to manslaughter. But here, if you're in a fight and you hit somebody and he dies, that's it.
That's what it seems. although it also does appear to me that I'm very interested in this passage, right, with this just uh, huge number of particular cases, right, many of which seem very similar to one another, right? So in this case, you're a murderer. In this case, you're not a murderer, right? It seems to me that this profusion of different cases seems to suggest, right, that there's a lot of arguing to do, right? That the slayer and the blood avenger basically go to court, right? And there's a decision that gets rendered. And so the jury, such as it is, or the court needs to decide, right? Was this murder or was this manslaughter, right? Based on witness testimony. But this is also very interesting, right? That the congregation, meaning the congregation of the city, shall judge between the smiter and the avenger according to these ordinances, and the congregation shall deliver the manslayer out of the hand of the avenger of blood, and the congregation shall restore him to a city of refuge, whither he was fled, and he shall dwell therein until the death of the high priest, who was anointed with the holy oil. But if the manslayer shall at any time go beyond the border of his city of refuge, whither he fleeth, and the avenger of blood find him meaning outside the border of his city of refuge, and the avenger of blood slay the manslayer, there shall be no blood guiltiness for him, because he must remain in his city of refuge until the death of the high priest. But after the death of the high priest, the manslayer may return into the land of his possession. And these things shall be for a statute of judgment unto you throughout your generations and all your dwellings. So whoever killeth any person, the murderer shall be slain at the mouth of the witness. But one witness shall not testify against any person that he die. Right. This is the bedrock feature of Torah jurisprudence, right? That you can only execute someone on the basis of two eyewitnesses. Single witness is not enough. And moreover, you shall take no ransom for the life of the murderer that is guilty of death, but he shall surely be put to death. Right? There's no amount of, and that's, which I think is a very important thing. Anything, basically, there are several categories of crime in the Torah that constitute capital crime, right? But a lot of different crimes, right, are sort of, the punishment is financial, right? You pay money to expiate your guilt. In the case of a capital crime, right, there's no amount of money can wash away your guilt. So you're stuck. All right. So that adds a little bit of complexity, right, in terms of how do you decide, what's the process for deciding. So now let's look at chapter 19 of here. Okay, so thou shalt separate 3 cities for thee in the midst of the land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee to possess it. Thou shalt prepare thee the way and divide the borders of the land into 3 parts, that every manslayer may flee thither. And this is the case of the manslayer, that he shall flee thither and live. Whoso killeth his neighbor unawares and hated him not in past time. Right, so we have this. Yeah, actually, here it is, Joel, the one that I had mentioned. I thought it was in a different chapter, but it's here. As when a man goeth into the forest with his neighbor to hew wood, and his hand fetcheth a stroke with his axe to cut down the tree, and the head slippeth from the helve, and lighteth upon his neighbor that he die, and he shall flee unto one of these cities and live. Lest the avenger of blood pursue the manslayer while his heart is hot, and overtake him, because the way is long, and smite him mortally, whereas he was not deserving of death, inasmuch as he hated him not in past time. Great. All right. So, and why is it, right? Why is it? And I think that this gets to the point, right, that we were saying before, right, is that innocent blood not be shed in the midst of thy land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance, and slow blood be upon thee, right? Because if we end up polluting the land, right, with the blood of innocent people, right, then we are the ones ultimately who will pay the price, right, for that pollution, right? And I think about that a lot in our current state of mass incarceration, right, and in unequal treatment of different categories of prisoners, primarily based on skin color, right? That how much innocent blood has been shed, right, in the name of public safety or law and order or whatever we call it. Thine eye shall. But if any man hate his neighbor, lie and wait for him, and rise up against him, and smite him mortally that he die, and he flee into one of these cities, then the elders of his city shall send and fetch him thence, and deliver him into the hand of the avenger of blood, that he might die. Right? The exact opposite situation. Thine eye shall not pity him, but thou shalt put away the blood of the innocent from Israel, that it might go well with thee. Right? So if someone has killed somebody with malice aforethought, right, then the idea is that innocent blood has been shed, and we need to expiate for that. All right. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Jeannie.
I'm almost afraid to ask, but how do you think that this killing might take place? Is there a mode of capital punishment that you're familiar with?
Well, that's interesting, actually. According to this, right, the avenger is supposed to do the killing, right? It's this weird sort of basically sending him into the scorpion's nest or something. You know, like it's extrajudicial killing, but it's judicially ordered extrajudicial killing, right? Which seems very odd to me, right? There are 4 methods outlined in Deuteronomy of capital punishment. There's burning, stoning. Those are the ones I can think of, but there's 2 others. I don't.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you can't remember. Burning. I mean, you mean burning someone alive?
Yeah, and the rabbis go to great lengths to figure out what was the process to try to make it so that it doesn't so it didn't seem as horrible as like burning at the stake. Basically, what they came up with is that you make people swallow something burning, and it burns them internally, so that immediately. Yeah, it's crazy.
Sounds awful.
It is awful. I mean, it's all, you know, and it's so, you know, and it's so interesting the degree to which the rabbis, you know, discuss these things in great detail with the ultimate motive of making them impossible, right? You know, basically is the goal of the rabbi's discussion is to make it so that capital punishment will never happen. And so, you know, in that, you know, I mean, judicially, right, the only prisoner that the state of Israel has ever put to death was Adolf Hitler. Extrajudicially, of course, is a different matter, right, in terms of military and police operations. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Well, I was wondering also if you have any thoughts on where this weird part of the law comes from, that the person who has fled has to wait until the priest dies.
Yes.
That is so weird. Can't make any sense of that, because that's such a variable
right.
Sentence.
Right. Well, A, it's a variable sentence, and B, it's not, at least immediately clear to me, what the relevance is.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So there's a clue, though. I think if we continue with the book of Joshua, and maybe I don't know that we'll be able to make sense of it, but let's at least have a look. All right. Right. So until the death of the high priest, this is in verse 6 here on the screen, and he shall dwell in that city until he stand before the congregation for judgment. Until the death of the high priest that shall be in those days, right? When the high priest goes, that's the end. Then he can go back, right? And presumably at that point, he no longer has to worry about the avenger coming to get him. I dropped something and don't know where it went. It's very strange. Oh, it bounced over there. I just don't want to step on it. All right. And they set apart Kadesh in Galilee in the hill country of Naphtali, and Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and Kiryat Arba, the same as Hebron, right? Something that we know. Hebron, right, was the town that Caleb took, right, as his reward for being the great spy who, didn't say bad things about the land of Israel. In the hill country of Judah. And beyond the Jordan at Jericho eastward, they assigned Bezer in the wilderness and the tableland out of the tribe of Reuven, and Ramoth in Gilead out of the tribe of Gad, and Golan in Bashan out of the tribe of Manasseh. These were the appointed cities for all the children of Israel, and for the stranger that sojourneth among them, that whosoever killeth any person through error might flee thither and not die by the hand of the avenger of blood until he stood before the congregation. Right, I find it very interesting here, right, that there's no mention, unless I missed it, there's no mention of the blood of the innocent polluting the land, right, which was a big feature of the two portions in the Torah that we looked at. All right, so let's continue. Because it's still a mystery as to why it's the high priest. And again, I don't necessarily know the answer. I'm just thinking if we read a little bit more, we might have an idea. Then came near the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites, and to Eleazar the priest, and unto Yehoshua the son of Nun, and unto the heads of fathers' houses of the tribes of the children of Israel. And they spoke to them at Shiloh, in the land of Canaan, saying, the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses to give us cities to dwell in, with the open land thereabout for our cattle. Right? Throughout the Torah and in Joshua so far, we've seen, right, that we have 12 tribes. Right? One of them, though, is the Levites, and they do not receive they don't receive a portion of the land, right? Because their job is to serve in the temple, right? So the Levites are coming up and saying, look, guys, Moses said that we're supposed to get cities, and everyone is supposed to provide us with, everyone's supposed to provide us with space to live and sustenance and so on and so forth, right? And so the children of Israel gave unto the Levites out of their inheritance, according to the commandment of the Lord, these cities with the open land about them. And the lot came out for the families of the Kohathites, and the children of Aaron the priest, who were of the Levites, had by lot out of the tribe of Judah, and out of the tribe of the Simeonites, and out of the tribe of Benjamin, 13 cities. And the rest of the children of Kohath had by lot out of the families of the tribe of Ephraim, and out of the tribe of Dan, and out of the half tribe of Manasseh, 10 cities. And the children of Gershon had by lot out of the families of the tribe of Issachar, and out of the tribe of Asher, and out of the tribe of Naphtali, and out of the half tribe of Manasseh in Bashan, 13 cities. The children of Merari, according to their families, had out of the tribe of Reuven, and out of the tribe of Gad, and out of the tribe of Zebulun, 12 cities. And the children of Israel gave by lot unto these Levites the cities with the open land about them, as the Lord had commanded by the land of Moses. And they gave out of the tribe of the children of Judah and out of the tribe of the children of Simeon and 3 cities which are mentioned here by name. And they were for the children of Aaron, of the family of the Kohathites, who were of the children of Levi. For theirs was the first lot. And they gave them Kiryat Arba. Oi! Right? Kiryat Arba is one of the Ir Miklat, right? It's one of the cities of refuge, which Arba was the father of Anak. Right? So like the town of Arba, and Arba being the father of Anak, which is Anak is a giant. Right? The same is Hebron. So this is Hebron, in the hill country of Judah with the open land around it. But the fields of the city and the villages thereof gave they to Kalev, son of Yefuneh, for his possession. So this is very confusing, right? So they gave them Hebron with the open land around it, right? But the fields of the city and the villages they gave to Kalev, right? So the city itself is an Ir Miklat. It belongs to the Levites, right? Caleb doesn't get it. Caleb gets only the fields around, I guess the agricultural fields, and the villages. And under the children of Aaron the priest, they gave Hebron with the open land about it, the city of refuge for the manslayer, and Libnah with the open land about it, and Jatir with the open land about it, and so on and so forth. Okay. And out of the tribe of Benjamin, Gibeon with the open land about it, Geba with the open land about it, Anathot with the open land about it. Okay. And so on and so forth. All the cities of the children of Aaron, the priests, were 13 cities with open land about them. And the families of the children of Kohath, the Levites, even the rest of the children of Kohath, they had the cities of their lot out of the tribe of Ephraim. And they gave them Shechem. Wait a second. Another Ir Miklat, right? With the open land about it in the hill country of Ephraim, the city of refuge for the manslayer, and Gezer with the open land about it, and then a whole bunch of other places. All right. And unto the children of Gershon, right, the families of the Levites out of the half tribe of Manasseh, they gave Golan and Bashan with the open land about it, the city of refuge for the manslayer, and Bishtera with the open land about it, and so on and so forth. So you sort of see where this is going, right? So all of these, I'm not going to read all of them because it gets a little bit dry, right? But every one of these Ir Miklat, right? Every one of the cities of refuge turns out to be a Levitical city, right? And who are the Levites? Go ahead, Suzanne. You're muted.
The Levites, yes, Aaron's children. But my question, well, the reason I had my hand up is, so it talks about the cities and the open land.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if the city of refuge is for the manslayers, but the land around it is for the Levites. Because they said they had no land for their cattle. So their cattle wouldn't be in the city, it would be in the open land.
Right, exactly. But also very important, right, is that they don't appear to be given land for farming. They seem to be given land for grazing, right? So there, which I find very interesting, right, that they still need to rely on the other Israelites to provide them with vegetables, right, with non-meat produce. And yes, so they are very much so there's the Levites are supposed to be supported by the rest of the Israelites because they are I'm sorry, I'm having trouble.
Or the priests.
Yeah, they're the priests, right? They're the priests, and they are the ones who are supposed to be doing service to God. And very interesting, right? That the Levites are all over the place, right? You would think from Deuteronomy, right, that, of course, doesn't mention this business about, it does, I think, if I remember correctly, and let me just go check really quick. Does Deuteronomy mention the business about the high priests? I don't think it does, but I'm not gonna stand too closely on that, too hard, not gonna put too much weight on that. But I do find it interesting, right, that, that we have this seeming contradiction, maybe not a contradiction, but that the idea of the high priest needing to die before the sentence is over, right, happens here, and it happens in the book of Numbers. If I'm right that it doesn't happen in the book of Deuteronomy, why do you think it would be missing in the book of Deuteronomy?
Because it doesn't make any sense.
I think you're right, but not for the reason that you think you're right. Right? I think you're right because I think in the book of Deuteronomy, right, there are not all these Levitical cities, right, with local shrines, right? In the book of Deuteronomy, the idea is the centralization of worship, right? And so that everything happens in Jerusalem, right? So in a sense, maybe there's only at that point one Levitical city, right? And so there's a sort of a disconnection between the Levites and these Arei Miklat, right? That the cities of refuge are no longer Levitical cities, whereas maybe in the book of Numbers and in the book of Joshua, right? There's very interesting, right, that who is going to be doing the trials for these to decide, is this guy an actual murderer, right, or is he a manslaughterer, right? The people who are deciding that are the Levites, right? This becomes part of their job, right? Presumably the Levites have a sort of a special kind of connection with God, right? So by going, as we've discussed in the book of Jonah, not the book of Jonah, in the book of Samuel, right? It's the priests, right, who seem to have the capacity to ask questions of God and get answers from God, right? That's one of the functions of the priests. So in a sense, by sending them to Levitical cities, we're assuming that the Levites will have a little bit of divine guidance in terms of who is a murderer and thus deserves death, and who is a manslaughterer and thus deserves exile, right, as a punishment, as opposed to death as a punishment. So the answer that it's sort of forming in my mind, Jeannie, about the question you have, right, has to do with somehow that when there is it's maybe less to do with the death of the priest, right, than the ascension of a new head Kohen Gadol, right? That when the new Kohen Gadol comes on, right, all guilt, right, all punishments, all of that kind of stuff, are sort of washed away, right, and everyone sort of starts fresh. That's I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's what other people would say, but let me see if there is all they say here is perhaps the occasion for a general amnesty. But I do think that so I don't know if that's actually the reason, but there does seem to be some connection between the fact that these cities are all Levitical cities, at least here in Joshua. So I don't know if that's a satisfying answer, but it is an answer.
It's nice to start fresh. We have the concept of an appeals court. A new person looks at your case, very much dependent on what happened in the lower courts, but still you get fresh eyes. It just is so arbitrary and it has nothing to do with your guilt or innocence, whether the priest lives or dies.
Exactly. Well, I mean, but I think that is, I mean, in a way, right, that that is true, right? Is that in a sense, it's, you know, it feels to me like, um, whether you were innocent or guilty, uh, of capital murder, right, gives you, that is a decision that is a life or death decision. But this sort of limbo that you need to live in after you essentially win your appeal, right? It basically, instead of execution, you get life in prison, right? Unless the high priest dies first. But what it makes me think of, right, is our wonderful tradition of presidential pardon, right? The tradition that or not in the case of our dear leader now, right? Not even at the end of people's terms, but even in the middle of them, right? The president uh, pardon people. So Gerald Ford came into power, right, and almost immediately pardoned Richard Nixon, right, which had the effect of of, of making it impossible to do a full investigation of that.
But you say that being stuck in these cities is like being in prison, but isn't it just a normal life, bustling around also? And it's not
Yes.
just these people in asylum here. It's
Right, but
and maybe they might even already live in these cities. It's not discussed.
that is a possibility, but I think the way it's set up is that would be unlikely um, because the population of these cities is limited to Levites, right? I mean, obviously, not that a Levite is never going to kill anyone accidentally, right? But the vast majority of the Israelites are not Levites. And so, uh, uh, and I think also I think it's hard for us to imagine, but maybe not even that hard. I mean, as Americans, because there is a custom in this country of like people just moving, across the country and starting fresh, starting fresh in a new place, right? But that is, in the time of the Torah, right? People are really tied to the land, right? This idea, right, is that it's very interesting that this whole conversation happens in the context, right, of assigning different portions of the land to the various tribes, right? This will be your ancestral place for not just for your lifetime, right, but for the entire history of the clan, right? This is the place where this clan will be. Obviously, it only happens for a couple of generations before things go south. But I do think that it's, in the consciousness of the Bible, right? The idea is that you are tied to the place that you're born and where your father was born and where your father's father was born. And so to be exiled to another place without any of that social structure, right, would be a difficult thing to manage. Like, who goes? Your whole family? Are you really by yourself? You take your wife? Do you take your children? I mean, I don't know how that all works. So, anyway. All right, any other comments or thoughts?
Well, I had a question about verse 42. And
Yes.
the gist of it is he's given them all the land. And then he says, and there stood not a man of all their enemies against them. The Lord delivered all their enemies into their hand. There failed not aught of any good thing which the Lord had spoken unto the house of Israel. So it sounds like if there's no man of their enemies standing against them, and he delivered all their enemies into their hand, I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, I mean, this I think gets back to what we were speaking about in previous weeks. I think even the last time that we spoke, right, is that there's this strange dual consciousness in the book of Joshua, right? on one hand, and this is the passage you just read, I think, Anne, right, which suggests, right, that the Israelites waltzed into the land of Canaan, right, divided it up, decided who got what, and everyone who was there just melted away, right? And then there is the counter narrative that we find expressed in many other places, right? Which says that, oh, and but the inhabitants of this city wouldn't be expunged, or these people survived and they still live with us to this very day, right? And so here, I guess I would say, I would get back to what I was saying before between not necessarily between description and prescription, but between sort of the what is the word I would want to use? Aspirational versus actual, right? So the aspiration, right, is for some sort of sole proprietorship, right? That the Israelites are the only ones on the land, and there's nobody else, and it's all going to, and it's so wonderful, and God did this for us, and so look at how wonderful it is and how wonderful it'll be, right? And then on the other hand, right, there's the sort of somewhat colder reality. For me, it's not a colder reality, right? It's a much preferable reality, right? Is that the Israelites, again, and I'm not talking from a historical point of view. I'm talking from what's presented in the Bible, right? That the Israelites came into the land and had to sort of struggle to figure out how to live in the land when there were already people living there, right?
Kind of like the settlers arriving in North America.
Right.
There were people already there, contrary to what many of us were taught in elementary school.
Exactly. Unfortunately, in our case, right, differences in technology actually made it possible for us to destroy so many of the civilizations that were here before us.
Diesel.
Yeah. Right, and also, right, smallpox and all kinds of horrible things.
Yeah.
No, this is a very human type of a story, and it's awful. But anyway, all right, we're past time. But thank you all very much,
Thank
and
you.
I will look forward to seeing you on Friday. I'm going to do a Zoom program on the poem that is on the program, and I invite you to join me. What we'll do there is we'll read the poem, and then people can we'll go around the Zoom room, and everyone will have a chance to reflect on that poem. It's a beautiful poem by William Carlos Williams. Okay, thanks again, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, thank you.
Thank you.